The flash of cameras blinded Claire Bennett the moment she stepped into the marble lobby of the Waldorf Grand. Every lens seemed to find her, freezing her in a storm of whispered scandal. "That's her," someone murmured. "The wife he left while she was pregnant." She wanted to vanish. Instead, she straightened her back, the soft satin of her navy dress tightening over her small but visible bump. Tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. She had promised herself that she would walk into this charity gala, the same event her husband once hosted, without breaking. Across the ballroom, a wave of laughter erupted. Claire's breath caught. Logan Pierce, her husband, well, ex-husband now, the man who had walked out 3 months ago, leaving her with a half-packed suitcase and a forged signature on the property transfer. And next to him, like a polished diamond on display, was Madison Cole, her former best friend. The same Madison who used to braid her hair before college parties, who cried on her shoulder after breakups, who swore she'd never hurt her. Now she was draped in silver silk, hand in hand with Claire's husband, wearing the smile of a woman who had won. Claire's pulse thudded in her ears. The reporters circled, sensing blood. Madison leaned into Logan, whispering something before glancing directly at Claire, her lips curving in the faintest smirk. It wasn't rage that Claire felt. It was clarity. A cold, sharp understanding that the people she had built her world around were never hers to begin with. Then, from behind her, a voice low and calm, "You shouldn't let them see you shake." She turned. A tall man in a black suit stood by the champagne bar, eyes steady, face familiar. Ethan Rowe, the lawyer who'd once worked for Logan's company before mysteriously resigning. He held her gaze for a moment that felt too long, too knowing. "Mr. Rowe," she managed, surprised he even remembered her. "Ethan," he corrected softly. "You look stronger than the last time I saw you." "The last time you saw me," she said bitterly, "my husband was introducing his mistress as my replacement." Ethan didn't flinch. "And yet, you showed up tonight. That's power, Claire. Don't waste it." Before she could reply, the MC's voice echoed through the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Logan Pierce and Madison Cole, our guests of honor." Applause roared like thunder. Claire's hands trembled around her clutch. Cameras turned again, flashing. Logan smiled for the crowd, that same charming grin that had once melted her. But when his eyes found hers across the room, the smile faltered, just for a second. Ethan leaned close, his voice almost a whisper. "He doesn't know it yet, but tonight's gonna change everything." Claire blinked, her heart pounding, a flath, realizing Ethan wasn't there by chance. He was waiting for this night. And somehow, she was part of his plan. Before betrayal had a name, before money and headlines replaced warmth and laughter, there had been love. Real, dizzying, reckless love. Claire Bennett used to believe that kind of love could conquer anything. She used to believe in him. 5 years ago, Logan Pierce wasn't a millionaire. He was a dreamer with messy hair and coffee-stained shirts, building a startup from his tiny Brooklyn apartment. She'd met him by accident, literally, when he'd spilled espresso on her sketchbook at a downtown cafe. He'd offered to buy her a new one, then spent 2 hours talking about algorithms and ambition until her latte turned cold. Claire was drawn to him, not for his charm, but for his hunger. He believed he was destined for greatness, and he made her believe it too. Their love story unfolded like a montage. Late-night takeout on the floor, brainstorming ideas with post-it notes covering the walls, laughing until dawn because they couldn't afford furniture. When his first app went viral, they celebrated with dollar store champagne and a kiss that promised forever. Madison Cole entered the picture a year later. She was Claire's college best friend, the kind of woman who drew every eye in the room without trying. Madison was loud where Claire was quiet, daring where Claire was careful. The three of them became inseparable. At least that's what Claire thought. Madison became the unofficial, public face of Logan's growing company. She knew everyone in the media world and helped land his first big investor. But slowly, the partnership blurred. Claire noticed the way Madison laughed a little too long at Logan's jokes, the way her hand brushed his arm in conversations that lingered. Logan always brushed it off. "Don't be paranoid, babe. She's helping me. Us." And Claire wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that ambition and temptation could coexist without destroying what they'd built. When Logan proposed, he did it in the most Logan way possible, on the rooftop of their first office building, with a simple gold ring and the city lights burning below them. "You and me, Claire," he'd whispered. "We'll build an empire." They did. Within 2 years, Logan's company exploded into the national market. Money, luxury, media attention, everything they had once dreamed of came true. But with success came distance. Late nights at the office became early mornings without him. Claire would wake to the faint scent of perfume that wasn't hers, or lipstick smudges on the wrong glass. Still, she told herself it was stress, exhaustion, anything but betrayal. Then came the pregnancy. The day she found out, she'd run to his office, trembling with excitement, holding the test like a secret too big to contain. But when she arrived, Madison was already there, standing too close, laughing too easily. Logan smiled distractedly, told Claire they'd talk later. He never did. In the weeks that followed, things changed fast. His voice grew colder, his patience thinner. He started sleeping in the guest room. The night he walked out, he didn't even look back. Just a short note on the counter and a check big enough to make his guilt disappear. Now, standing in that glittering ballroom months later, Claire could still remember the boy who'd spilled coffee on her sketches. She could still remember believing they were unstoppable. But that boy was gone, buried under designer suits and Madison's perfume. As she lifted her champagne glass, she caught Ethan watching her again from across the room. His expression wasn't pity. It was something else, like he knew there was more to come. And in that flicker of connection, Claire realized the story of her marriage wasn't over. It was just about to take a darker turn. The warning signs had always been there, Claire realized. Quiet, polished lies dressed up as concern. But love makes even the smartest women blind, and she had been hopelessly in love. It began subtly. Madison would stop by their apartment just to check on you, bringing bottles of wine that Claire couldn't drink once she was pregnant. She'd offer to help manage Logan's schedule, to lighten Claire's load. At first, it felt like kindness. Madison had always been the charismatic one, the social butterfly who made connections look effortless. But soon, her presence became suffocating. She started answering Logan's phone when Claire called. She began referring to the company as our project. And when Claire confronted her, Madison only smiled. "Relax, babe, you're hormonal. Logan and I just work well together. You should be grateful someone's watching his back." That sentence stuck in Claire's mind like a splinter. Watching his back. For what? On whom? One evening, as Logan prepared for another business dinner, Claire noticed a new cologne lingering on his shirt, something musky and unfamiliar. She reached for it, half teasing, half trembling. "You're really trying to impress investors, huh?" He didn't meet her eyes. "Just trying to keep the company afloat, Claire. Not everyone gets to stay home and decorate." The words hit her harder than any slap could. It wasn't just contempt, it was dismissal. The same man who once celebrated her creativity now saw her as furniture. Days turned into weeks. Logan grew more distant, while Madison's face appeared everywhere. Company events, magazine features, social media posts. Every article mentioned her name beside his. Pierce Innovations Power Duo. Claire scrolled through the headlines at night, the blue light from her phone reflecting off her tears. One night, unable to sleep, she drove to Logan's office downtown. The city was silent, soaked in rain. She parked across the street and watched as the top-floor lights flickered. Her stomach twisted when she saw them. Two silhouettes, close, too close. Logan and Madison. Her pulse thundered in her ears as Madison's hand slid along his chest, his head bending toward hers. She wanted to scream, to storm in and shatter the glass walls that hid their betrayal. But she didn't. Instead, she turned the car engine back on and drove until dawn, numb and empty. The next morning, Logan acted as if nothing had happened. He kissed her forehead before leaving for work, his tone mechanical. "You should rest more. Stress isn't good for the baby." The hypocrisy almost made her laugh. Almost. By the 3rd month, she had become invisible in her own home. The phone barely rang, and when it did, it was Madison's voice on the other end. "Logan's too busy for trivial things, Claire. Don't take it personally." It wasn't until she found the envelope hidden inside his desk drawer that the denial shattered. A series of signed transfer papers, notarized and dated. Her name was there, scrawled in neat cursive, transferring her half of their shared assets to Logan Pierce alone. Only she had never signed them. Her blood ran cold. The signature was flawless, an imitation so precise it could only have come from someone who'd studied her for years. Madison. Claire dropped the papers as if they burned. That night, she confronted Logan. "You forged my name," she whispered, voice shaking. "You took everything." He looked at her without remorse. "You were slowing me down, Claire. You'll get a settlement. Take it and go." She stood frozen, one hand instinctively over her belly. And in that moment, as thunder rolled outside their glass mansion, Claire knew. The man she'd loved had died long before that night, and the woman he left behind was about to be reborn. The night Claire found out she was pregnant should have been one of the happiest of her life. Instead, it became the night her world began to collapse. She remembered holding the little white test in her trembling hands, staring at the faint pink lines like they were a miracle. For weeks she'd been sick every morning, exhausted every night. She thought it was stress, the toll of living in the echo of her husband's ambition. But when those lines appeared, something in her heart bloomed. A spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, this baby could bring them back together. She waited for him that evening, dressed in the soft cream sweater he once said made her look like home. Dinner was ready. Candles flickered. The city lights spilled through the window, painting the floor in gold. But Logan didn't come home until midnight. He stumbled through the door, his tie loose, his breath heavy with whiskey. Claire's heart sank at the sight of lipstick on his collar, Madison's shade. She recognized it instantly, a deep crimson she could never pull off. "I made dinner," she said softly, trying to steady her voice. He glanced at the table, then waved dismissively. "I already ate. Long meeting." "Is that what we call her now?" Claire whispered. Logan froze. "What did you say?" She swallowed hard. "I know, Logan. I've seen you. You and Madison. Don't lie to me anymore." His jaw clenched. For a moment she thought she saw guilt flicker in his eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "You're imagining things. You've been under a lot of stress." "I'm pregnant." The words hung between them, fragile and electric. For a heartbeat, silence filled the room. Then Logan laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You think that's going to fix anything?" Tears blurred her vision. "I thought it might remind you of who we were." He poured himself a drink, ignoring the tremor in her voice. "Who we were doesn't exist anymore. You don't fit into this life, Claire. Not the way Madison does." Something inside her broke. "She's my best friend," she choked out. "How could you, both of you, do this?" Logan downed his whiskey in one gulp, his tone sharp and cruel. "Because she understands the business. The world I live in, you never did. You were good for the early days, for pretending we were a normal couple. But I've moved on." The sound that escaped Claire's throat didn't even feel human. "You're throwing away your family for an image." He set the glass down, his expression icy. "You'll get a settlement and a place in the Hamptons. You'll be fine. Just sign what my lawyer sends over." The conversation ended there. There was nothing left to say. That night, Claire packed a small suitcase. When she passed by the nursery, the one she had just begun to decorate, she paused, her hand resting on her stomach. The baby kicked, a faint flutter that made her gasp. It was then she realized she couldn't stay. Not in this house, not with this man. She left quietly, stepping out into the freezing rain. The wind howled through the empty streets as thunder cracked above her. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to keep walking. Hours later, her strength gave out. The pain hit like a knife, sharp, sudden, merciless. She doubled over on the sidewalk, clutching her stomach as the world spun. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness, brakes screeching to a stop. A man rushed toward her, his voice distant, urgent. Hey, stay with me, Claire." It was Ethan Rowe. And as her vision faded, the last thing she saw was his face, calm, determined, before everything went black. When Claire opened her eyes, the world was white and silent. The faint hum of hospital machines echoed around her, and the sterile smell of antiseptic filled her nose. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was, only the cold weight of fear pressing against her chest. Then it came rushing back. The rain, the pain, the headlights. Her hand shot to her stomach, panic surging through her. But then, movement. A faint, steady flutter beneath her palm. Tears filled her eyes. The baby was still there? Alive? "You're awake," a deep voice said. She turned her head. Ethan Rose stood by the doorway, his gray suit rumpled, his tie loosened, and a cup of coffee in his hand. His usual sharpness was replaced with something softer, concern. "You passed out in the middle of Fifth Avenue," he said gently. "You're lucky I was leaving a meeting nearby." "You saved me," she whispered. He shrugged slightly. "I just called the ambulance. You did the hard part." The nurse entered, checking her vitals with a smile. "You and the baby are stable, Mrs. Pierce, but you need rest. Stress is dangerous at this stage." Claire nodded weakly. The word Mrs. Pierce stung. She wasn't sure if she even had the right to that name anymore. After the nurse left, Ethan moved closer. "Does Logan know?" Claire let out a bitter laugh. "Logan doesn't care. He made that clear." Ethan hesitated. "I know what he did, Claire. More than you think." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder, sliding it onto her bedside table. "Not tonight. You need to recover first. But when you're ready, open that. It'll explain why you're not the only one he betrayed." Before she could press further, the doctor entered, and Ethan quietly stepped out. That night, Claire lay awake staring at the ceiling. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor lulled her, but her thoughts were anything but calm. The manila folder sat unopened beside her, its presence heavy and mysterious. She thought of Logan, probably sleeping soundly in their penthouse, wrapped in Madison's arms, while she lay alone, surrounded by machines. The next morning she was discharged with strict orders to rest. Ethan offered to drive her home, but she refused. "I don't have one," she said quietly. He didn't push. Instead, he took her to a small, furnished apartment he owned near Central Park. "It's empty. Stay here until you figure out your next step," he said simply. "I can't." "Claire?" His tone softened. "You don't owe me anything. Let this be a clean start." Over the next few weeks, she began to heal. She cooked small meals, walked in the park, and tried to remember how to breathe again. Ethan checked in occasionally, always brief, always polite, but she sensed something guarded behind his calm exterior, like he knew more than he was saying. One morning, unable to resist, she finally opened the folder. Inside were documents, emails, transaction records, and photos. Her blood ran cold. Logan had been funneling company funds into an offshore account under Madison's name. Worse, some transfers bore her forged signature. If the authorities discovered it, she could be implicated. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. Ethan had been right. Logan's betrayal ran deeper than love. It was criminal. A single note lay at the bottom of the folder in Ethan's neat handwriting. "When you're strong enough, we'll fight back. Until then, stay quiet." Claire exhaled shakily, pressing a hand over her stomach. The baby kicked gently, as if reminding her she wasn't alone. And in that quiet apartment, Claire made a silent vow. She wouldn't just survive this. She would rise from it. And when she did, every secret Logan Pierce buried would burn. The winter that followed was the coldest New York had seen in a decade. Snow blanketed the streets in silence. The city's usual roar muted to a distant hum. Inside the small Central Park apartment, Claire lived like a ghost, half alive, half waiting. Days bled into nights. She slept on the couch because the bed felt too big, too empty. The coffee table was covered in unpaid bills and old ultrasound photos, reminders of the life that was coming whether she was ready or not. She talked to her unborn child sometimes, whispering promises through the quiet. "I'll keep you safe," she'd murmur, "even if it kills me." Her belly grew heavier, and so did the loneliness. Every time she passed a newsstand, she saw Logan's face smiling back at her. Pierce Innovations raises record funding. The power couple of tech, Logan Pierce and Madison Cole. Their world glittered while hers collapsed in silence. Ethan visited once a week, always bringing groceries and quiet reassurance. He never pitied her, something she was deeply grateful for. Once she asked why he helped her at all. He only said, "Let's just say Logan and I share unfinished business." But one night, the silence broke. Claire woke to pounding on the door. Her heart jumped. It was after midnight, and snow was falling thick outside. She pulled on her robe, opened the door, and froze. Her younger brother, Ryan, stood there, shaking, soaked to the bone. "Claire, I messed up." She pulled him inside. He was thinner than she remembered, his face pale, eyes darting. He smelled like cigarettes and desperation. "What happened?" she asked, guiding him to the couch. "I borrowed money," he muttered, "from people I shouldn't have." "Ryan?" I thought I could double it, start something small, pay it back. But it went bad. They said if I don't pay by Friday, they'll come after me. He looked up at her, terrified. Claire, they know where you live. The air left her lungs. She wanted to scream, to cry, but instead she forced herself to think. Ethan's words echoed in her mind. Stay quiet. If Logan caught wind of this, he'd use it against her. I'll handle it, she said finally, though her voice shook. The next day, she called Ethan. When he arrived, she told him everything. He listened silently, then said, I'll make some calls. But Claire, if they're who I think they are, you need to leave this apartment. Tonight. Within hours, she was in his car, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city disappear through the window. Ethan drove north to a secluded cabin near the Hudson River. It's safer here, he said, helping her inside. That Nair stood by the window, snowflakes drifting against the glass. Every time I think I've hit bottom, she whispered, it gets deeper. Ethan stood behind her, his reflection calm but firm. That's because you're not meant to stay at the bottom. Her eyes met his in the glass. You really think I can come back from this? He hesitated. I don't think. I know. The words struck something deep inside her, a spark she hadn't felt in months. She didn't know if she believed him yet, but for the first time, she wanted to. Later that night, as the wind howled outside, Claire lay awake, her hand resting on her stomach. The baby kicked once, strong and sure. It was as if life itself was reminding her that she was still in the fight. And somewhere between the sound of the storm and the beating of her heart, Claire made another silent vow. If she ever climbed out of this darkness, she would never let anyone break her again. 2 months later, the Hudson thawed, and with it, something inside Claire began to shift. She was still fragile, mentally, physically, but not broken anymore. The quiet of the cabin had given her space to think, to breathe, and to begin piecing together the woman she used to be. The morning started early. Ethan had left her a small notebook on the kitchen table with one sentence written inside. Make something beautiful again. At first, she didn't understand. But one day, while walking through the cabin's attic, she found an old drafting table coated in dust. It reminded her of who she was before Logan, before the lies, before the loneliness. So she started sketching again. The lines came shaky at first, hesitant, but soon her hands remembered. Designs poured out of her like rain. Furniture layouts, home interiors, things she'd never had the courage to create when Logan controlled every decision. She lost herself in it for hours, and when she finished, she realized she'd stopped thinking about him entirely. Ethan visited every weekend, bringing groceries and quiet conversation. He never asked about Logan or Madison, and Claire never mentioned the past unless it slipped out between sips of tea. Instead, they talked about the future, hers specifically. You have something rare, Ethan said one afternoon watching her sketch. You don't just design spaces, you heal them. Claire smiled faintly. I'm still learning how to heal myself. You're doing it, he said softly. She didn't know how to respond. For weeks, she'd fought off the loneliness by building imaginary walls around her heart. But with Ethan, the walls started to crack. He never flirted, never crossed a line, but sometimes, when their hands brushed while passing coffee mugs, a quiet current pulsed between them. Then one evening, everything changed. Claire was sitting by the fire, sketching nursery ideas, when Ethan's phone rang. His expression darkened as he answered. Yes? He said sharply. A pause. Where? He hung up and turned to her. Someone broke into your old apartment. Claire froze. What? They tore the place apart. Police think they were looking for something. Her pulse spiked. Ryan, Ethan nodded grimly. I already had someone check. He's gone. Disappeared 3 days ago. Panic seized her chest. They took him, didn't they? I don't know, Ethan admitted. But whoever's behind this knows about you now. Claire gripped the edge of the table. You said this place was safe. It was, Ethan said quietly, until someone tipped them off. The words hit her like a blow. You think, Logan? I don't think, Ethan interrupted. I know. He's trying to flush you out, those accounts I showed you? He's using them to cover the missing company funds, and if you disappear permanently, you'll take the blame. Her knees buckled. Ethan caught her before she fell. Listen to me, he said, steadying her. You're not alone in this. I've been building a case for months, but I need proof. Documents only you can access. She looked up at him, trembling. From Logan's office. He nodded. Exactly. For the first time in months, Claire felt something powerful stir inside her. Not fear, but resolve. "I'll go back," she whispered. Ethan blinked. "You're pregnant, Claire. It's too risky." She placed a hand on her belly. "He's already taken everything from me. My home, my name, my peace. I won't let him take my future, too." Ethan stared at her, seeing not the fragile woman he'd rescued, but the warrior she was becoming. "Then we do this together," he said finally. Outside, the wind howled again, but this time, it didn't sound like despair. It sounded like change. And as the firelight flickered across her determined face, Claire knew this was no longer about surviving. It was about reclaiming her life. 3 days later, Claire Bennett stood in front of the glass tower that once bore her husband's name, Pierce Innovations. The mirrored surface reflected the city skyline and, faintly, the face of the woman she used to be. Fragile, hopeful, dependent. That version of her was gone. What stood here now was someone new, calmer, colder, carved by betrayal and fire. She wore a simple black coat that hid her growing belly, her hair pulled into a sleek bun. Ethan had warned her again that morning, his voice low but firm. "If anything feels wrong, you walk away." "I won't get another chance," she'd replied. He sighed. "Then keep your phone on. I'll be 2 blocks away." Now, as she stepped into the lobby, every sound felt sharper. The click of her heels, the hum of the elevator, the polite greetings of the receptionist who didn't recognize her anymore. That used to hurt. Now it felt like armor. The plan was simple, but risky. Ethan had traced the location of encrypted files to Logan's private office server. Those files contained everything: proof of the offshore accounts, the forged signatures, the shell companies under Madison's name. If she could copy them, Ethan could expose Logan publicly and clear her name. The elevator doors slid open to the top floor. The sight stole her breath. The space hadn't changed. Polished marble floors, glass walls overlooking Manhattan, and the faint scent of his cologne that still haunted her. Her pulse quickened. She could almost see him pacing, phone pressed to his ear, barking orders. But Logan wasn't here. Not yet. She slipped inside his office, moving quickly. The desk gleamed, spotless, except for a framed photo of him and Madison smiling for a magazine cover. The power couple of the year. Her stomach twisted. "Focus," she whispered to herself. She found the safe behind a panel of the bookshelf, just where Ethan said it would be. She typed the code he'd given her, hands trembling. A soft click. Inside were stacks of files and a hard drive. She grabbed both, slipping them into her bag. Then, footsteps. Claire froze. The door creaked open, and Logan's voice filled the air. "I thought I heard heels." Her breath hitched. Slowly she turned. He looked almost exactly the same, impeccably dressed, expensive watch gleaming, but his eyes were sharper, colder. "Claire," he said, surprised but amused, "you look different." "Pregnancy will do that," she said flatly. He stepped closer, smirking. "You shouldn't be here." "I could say the same to you," she replied. His gaze dropped to her belly, then back to her face. "So it's true. You kept it." "Them," she corrected. "Twins." For a moment something flickered in his eyes. Shock, maybe even fear, but it vanished. "Congratulations. I'm sure they'll make lovely accessories for your next charity appearance. Assuming you can afford one." Her jaw clenched. "You forged my name, Logan. You stole everything." He laughed. "You always were too sentimental for business." Claire's hand inched toward her bag, but his eyes caught the movement. "What's that?" Before she could answer, the door burst open. Madison walked in, her smile fading when she saw Claire. "Oh my God," she breathed. "You actually came." The tension thickened. Logan glanced at Madison, then back at Claire. "You thought you could outsmart me?" he sneered. "You were always too emotional for this world, Claire." Her heart pounded. "No," she said quietly. "I just finally learned how yours works." Then, before either could react, she pressed the hidden button on her phone, Ethan's signal. Outside, security alarms suddenly blared. Logan's smirk vanished. Claire turned toward the window, her voice steady. "You wanted power, Logan. You're about to see what real power looks like." And as the sirens echoed through the skyscraper, Claire walked past him, leaving behind the man who once owned her heart and taking with her the evidence that would destroy his empire. The moment Claire stepped into the elevator, the alarm's shriek filled the air. Red lights flashed down the corridor like warning beacons. She clutched her bag to her chest, every heartbeat echoing in her ears. The USB drive was inside, a small piece of plastic that held the truth powerful enough to ruin Logan Pierce forever. The elevator doors closed, but before they could seal, a hand slammed between them. Logan's. He shoved the doors open, eyes burning with fury. "You're not going anywhere." Claire backed away, the confined space suddenly suffocating. "You brought this on yourself, Logan. You stole from your own company, from me." He sneered. "You think anyone's going to believe you? A woman who walked out on her husband and ran off pregnant with another man's help? You're a story, Claire. A tragedy the media will devour." Her fingers tightened around the emergency phone in the elevator. "Maybe. But even stories can turn on their villains." Logan lunged. She ducked, slamming her elbow into his ribs. The movement sent pain shooting through her side, her body reminding her she was 7 months pregnant. Still, adrenaline pushed her forward. She hit the button for the lobby and kicked the close command until the doors slid shut, just as Logan's fist struck the metal. The elevator began its descent. Claire's breath came fast, shallow. She could feel the twins shifting inside her, responding to her panic. "It's okay," she whispered, pressing her hand to her belly. "Mommy's got you." When the doors opened at the lobby, chaos erupted. Security guards rushed past her toward the upper floors, radios blaring. She slipped through the crowd and out into the cold night air. The city hit her like a shock. Honking taxis, flashing lights, snow swirling under the street lamps. Across the street, Ethan's black sedan idled. He jumped out the second he saw her. "Did you get it?" She nodded, clutching the bag. "All of it. But he knows." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then we don't have much time." They sped away through the city, the skyline glowing behind them. For a long stretch, neither spoke. The tension hung heavy, broken only by the sound of the windshield wipers slicing through the snow. Finally, Claire said, "He tried to trap me again. Said no one would believe me." Ethan's grip on the wheel tightened. "He's right about one thing. The press will spin it, but once I leak these documents to the SEC, it won't matter what story he tells. Facts speak louder." She turned toward him. "You've been planning this for a while, haven't you?" Ethan exhaled, eyes still on the road. "Logan ruined more lives than yours. He used my name to secure fake investments years ago. I lost everything, my firm, my reputation. I've been collecting proof ever since." She stared at him, stunned. "You could have left me out of this." "I couldn't," he said quietly, "because you're the key. You're the only one whose name still ties to the trust he used. Without you, the case dies." For the first time, she saw the weight Ethan carried, the guilt, the determination, and underneath it, something else. When they reached the bridge, blue lights flashed behind them. "Police. Damn it," Ethan muttered, pulling into a side street. "They're not real cops," he said after a glance in the mirror. "Logan's men." Claire's pulse spiked. "What do we do?" He handed her a second USB drive. "This has a copy. If anything happens, you take it and run." "I'm not leaving you," she said fiercely. "Claire." Before he could finish, a black SUV screeched to a stop behind them. Men jumped out, shouting. Ethan slammed the gas, the tires screeching on the icy road. The car fishtailed, headlights slicing through the dark. "Hold on," he shouted. The SUV rammed into their bumper. Claire screamed, clutching her stomach as the car spun toward the guardrail. Glass shattered, metal twisted. Then, impact. Everything went white. When the world returned, sirens wailed in the distance. Claire blinked, dazed, her vision swimming. Ethan was slumped over the steering wheel, unconscious but breathing. Snow drifted through the broken window. And as Claire crawled out of the wreckage, clutching the drive to her chest, one truth burned in her mind. She wasn't running anymore. The fight had just begun. The crash should have killed her. That's what the doctor said later. But when Claire opened her eyes to the sterile white of a hospital room, she was alive. Bruised, aching, stitched, but alive. The first sound she heard was the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. The second was a faint, steady heartbeat echoing through a fetal monitor beside her. The babies. They were still alive. Tears blurred her vision as she reached for her stomach. "You held on," she whispered. "You held on for me." A nurse appeared, checking her vitals with a warm smile. "You're lucky, Miss Bennett. It was close. The man who was with you, he's in surgery but stable." Claire closed her eyes. Relief flooded through her. "Ethan," she murmured. "Thank God." The nurse hesitated. "He's been asking about you, even before they sedated him." Said to tell you not to lose that bag you had. The bag. Claire's gaze darted to the corner of the room. There it was, resting on a chair, scuffed but intact. Inside was the USB drive. The evidence, the leverage, the weapon. She had risked her life for it. Now it was her only way forward. Hours later, while the hospital slept, she opened her phone. Notifications exploded across the screen. Breaking news, financial scandal, investigation rumors. Someone had leaked preliminary files from Pierce Innovations to the media. Photos of Logan and Madison flashed everywhere. Headlines screaming, "Allegations of fraud rock tech power couple." She stared in disbelief. Ethan must have uploaded the data before the crash. Even half dead, he'd kept his promise. But victory didn't feel sweet. Not yet. By morning, reporters gathered outside the hospital, hungry for quotes, for scandal. Claire asked to be discharged early, needing air, space, and control. She signed herself out against medical advice and went straight to Ethan's room. He looked pale, a bandage over his forehead, his arm in a sling. When he saw her, he smiled weakly. "You look terrible." She laughed despite the lump in her throat. "You're not exactly glowing yourself." He gestured toward the TV mounted on the wall. News anchors dissected the fall of Pierce Innovations. "It's only the beginning," Ethan said. "The SEC's coming. The board's panicking. He's losing everything." Claire watched the screen. Logan's once perfect smile now replaced by footage of him shoving microphones away, Madison trailing behind with sunglasses hiding her face. "I should feel happy," she whispered, "but all I feel is empty." "That's normal," Ethan said softly. "When you lose something you built, even if it was poisoned, it still leaves a scar." She turned to him. "You knew this would happen. You've been planning it for years." He didn't deny it. "I just didn't expect you'd be the one to finish it." Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken gratitude, and something deeper neither dared name. Then Ethan reached into the drawer beside his bed and handed her a folded document. "I drafted this months ago. It's a trust agreement. For your children. When they're born, they'll inherit my stake in the company once it's liquidated." Her breath caught. "Ethan, no. It's not charity," he said firmly. "It's justice. Let something good come out of all this ruin." Claire's throat tightened. She took his hand, her voice trembling. "You saved me twice, once on the street and again from myself." He smiled faintly. "Then promise me one thing. Don't stop fighting. You're stronger than you think, Claire." Outside, the city was waking to chaos. Reporters shouting, investors fleeing, headlines unraveling a dynasty. Inside that quiet hospital room, Claire made her choice. She wasn't just a victim or a widow in waiting. She was a mother, a survivor, and a woman reborn. And as she looked out the window toward the morning light, Claire whispered the words that marked the beginning of her new life. "This time, I fight for me." By the time Claire was strong enough to walk out of the hospital, New York had turned against Logan Pierce. His empire, once a monument of glass and arrogance, was now collapsing under the weight of public scrutiny. Headlines followed her everywhere. Pierce Innovations under investigation, power couple vanish amid fraud allegations, ex-wife at center of scandal. She ignored them all. She had something far more important to focus on. Ethan had been discharged a few days earlier, insisting he was fine. They met in a quiet cafe downtown, one of the few places where the cameras couldn't reach. He looked tired but alive, his arm still in a sling. "You look stronger," he said as she sat down. "I feel stronger," Claire replied, her voice steadier than it had been in months. "The babies are due in 6 weeks." He smiled faintly. "And the woman who was supposed to be ruined is now the one holding all the cards." Claire stirred her tea, her eyes drifting toward the window where snow still lined the streets. "I don't want revenge, Ethan. I want closure. For them. For me." "You'll have it," he said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were court documents. A summons, an affidavit, and a formal notice from the SEC. Logan and Madison have been ordered to appear in court next month. Fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, it's all coming out. Claire exhaled, a tremor of relief and disbelief mixing in her chest. "You really did it. We did it," she thought, though she didn't say it out loud. That night, back in her apartment, she found herself scrolling through old photos, the ones she hadn't been able to delete. Her and Logan smiling on their wedding day. Madison throwing confetti at them, her laughter bright and false. Her hand drifted to her stomach. "You'll never know that version of me," she whispered to her unborn children. And that's a good thing. She had begun seeing a therapist at Ethan's insistence. Dr. Hayward, a calm woman with silver hair and kind eyes, had a way of cutting through Claire's defenses. "You're not rebuilding," she told Claire during one session. "You're becoming." Those words stayed with her. Claire started taking small freelance projects again. Design work for boutique hotels, penthouse remodels. Her reputation, though tainted by association with Logan, slowly began to recover. Clients admired her resilience, her quiet dignity. One even told her, "You survived what most people wouldn't walk away from. That's power money can't buy." Still, there were nights when the fear returned. Flashes of headlights, the memory of glass shattering, the echo of Logan's voice calling her sentimental. But every time she faltered, Ethan's steady voice replayed in her mind, "You're stronger than you think." Then one evening, just as she was settling in with a cup of tea, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Claire Bennett?" a man's voice asked. "This is Detective Morales, NYPD Financial Crimes. We thought you'd want to know. Logan Pierce was arrested at JFK tonight, attempted to flee the country." Her breath caught. "He's in custody?" "Yes, ma'am. We have him and Madison Cole. They won't be walking away from this one." She thanked him and hung up, her hands trembling. The silence in the room felt different now, lighter, freer. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just closed her eyes and whispered, "Finally." Later that night she visited Ethan. He was sitting by the fireplace reading. When he looked up, she said quietly, "They caught him." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan reached for her hand. "It's over, Claire." She shook her head. "No, it's just beginning." Because now that the man who destroyed her was in chains, she could finally build something that was hers. A life defined not by pain, but by purpose. The day her twins were born, the sky over Manhattan was streaked with gold, the kind of sunrise that felt like a promise. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the sound of two newborn cries, fragile but fierce. Claire Bennett had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but never like this. No husband's hand to hold, no smiling photos for the magazines. Just her, the two lives she'd fought to protect, and the quiet certainty that everything she'd endured had led to this. The nurse placed the babies in her arms. One boy had her dark eyes, the other her quiet mouth. "Noah and Liam," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Welcome home." Ethan stood by the door, pale but smiling, a bouquet of lilies in his good hand. "They're perfect," he said softly. Claire looked up at him, exhausted but radiant. "You kept me alive for this," she said. He smiled faintly. "No, you kept yourself alive. I just refused to let you quit." For the first time in months she laughed, a full, unguarded sound that filled the room. As the days passed, the media storm outside only grew louder. Logan and Madison's arrests dominated every headline. Footage showed them being escorted into federal court, their designer coats no longer armor but evidence of arrogance. Pierce empire crumbles, secret offshore accounts exposed. Claire's name appeared too, not as the victim, but as the whistleblower, the woman who had taken down her own betrayer. Ethan wanted her to hide, but Claire refused. "I won't disappear," she said. "If I stay silent, they still win." So she faced the world, carefully. On the morning of her discharge, she sat for one exclusive interview, a calm, elegant conversation that aired on national television. "I didn't destroy anyone," she told the interviewer, her voice steady. "I exposed the truth. The people who built their lives on lies destroyed themselves." The clip went viral. Women from across the country flooded her social media with messages: admiration, gratitude, solidarity. "You reminded me to never stay quiet. You gave me hope." But while the world hailed her as a symbol of strength, privately, Claire was just trying to figure out motherhood. Nights blurred into days. The twins cried in shifts, their tiny lungs reminding her of how fragile new beginnings could be. She barely slept, surviving on caffeine and instinct. Still, when she looked at them, when she saw their eyes, their unfiltered trust, she knew she would do it all over again. Ethan visited often, always bringing small comforts: diapers, baby formula, silence. One evening he walked in to find her asleep on the couch, one baby on each arm. The television played softly in the background, a news anchor discussing the ongoing investigation. He watched her for a long moment, something unspoken flickering in his eyes. Then he quietly adjusted a blanket over her shoulders and turned off the TV. Weeks later, as spring began to thaw the city, Claire received a letter from the court. Logan had pled guilty to fraud and conspiracy. Madison had turned on him, cutting a deal in exchange for testimony. Logan faced 15 years. Claire stared at the letter for a long time, her heart still and calm. Justice didn't feel triumphant. It felt peaceful. That night, she stood by the nursery window, watching the city lights blink below. The babies slept soundly, their soft breathing the only rhythm she needed. She whispered to them, "You were born out of the worst pain of my life, but you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Then her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Meet me tomorrow. There's something you need to see." And as Claire glanced down at her sleeping sons, she didn't know that what waited for her the next day wasn't another battle. It was the truth that would change everything she thought she knew about Ethan Rowe. The following morning, the city was washed clean by a thin drizzle, the kind that blurred reflections and made even the ugliest streets look poetic. Claire bundled the twins, kissed their foreheads, and left them with the sitter. Her stomach churned with curiosity and something darker as she drove across Manhattan to the address Ethan had texted. It wasn't his usual office. It was an old warehouse near the river, quiet and half-abandoned. She parked, heart pounding, and stepped inside. Ethan was already there, standing beside a table cluttered with files, hard drives, and sealed envelopes. He looked different, older somehow, the weight of too many secrets visible in the shadows beneath his eyes. "You said you had something to show me," she said cautiously. He nodded and slid a folder toward her. "Everything you thought you knew about Logan's company, it's only part of the story." Claire frowned, flipping open the folder. Inside were documents she didn't recognize, bank transfers, corporate filings, a list of shareholders. At the top was a name that froze her blood. Rowe Capital Holdings. Her gaze snapped to him. "That's your firm." "It was," Ethan said quietly, "before Logan stole it from me." He began pacing, the confessions spilling out like a flood he could no longer hold back. Years ago, before she ever met Logan, Ethan had been his mentor. Together, they'd built the foundation of Pierce Innovations. Ethan as investor, Logan as the visionary. But greed had taken root early. Logan forged signatures, manipulated contracts, and forced Ethan out, taking everything. "I lost everything, my company, my reputation, my family," Ethan said. "That's when I started digging. I thought exposing him would bring closure, but then I found something worse." He pulled another envelope from the pile, thicker this time, sealed with an evidence tag. This is what he was really protecting. Inside were photos, grainy black and white images of shipping manifests, offshore accounts, and private jets tied to a company called Novatech. Each document bore the same signature, Logan Pierce. Claire's voice trembled. "What is this?" "Money laundering," Ethan replied. "And not just money. Data, biometric research, surveillance tech sold overseas. He wasn't just stealing from investors, he was selling people's identities." Her knees went weak. "You're saying he's part of something bigger?" Ethan nodded. "And the people he worked with, they're still out there. Logan going to prison doesn't stop them. If anything, it makes you a target." The words struck like lightning. "A target?" He met her eyes. "Those twins, they're the last legal heirs to his fortune. The trust he set up before all this, it's now worth hundreds of millions. If something happens to you, custody and control could go to his next of kin." Claire's blood ran cold. "Madison, she'd never, she would," Ethan cut in. "She's desperate and she's not alone." A sudden crash echoed from outside, the sound of a door slamming. Ethan's eyes snapped toward the window. "We're out of time." Before Claire could speak, the warehouse lights flickered. Footsteps. Multiple. Ethan grabbed the files and shoved them into a duffel bag. "Go out the back. Now." "Ethan, what about?" "I'll buy you a minute," he said, already moving toward the front entrance. "Get the babies somewhere safe. Don't go home." The urgency in his voice sent adrenaline surging through her. Claire clutched the bag and ran toward the back door, the echo of boots and shouting closing in behind her. Just as she slipped out into the rain-soaked alley, a gunshot cracked the air. She froze, heart seizing, the world spinning around her. "Ethan!" she screamed, turning back toward the warehouse. No answer. Just the echo of footsteps retreating and the rain swallowing the sound. And as Claire fled into the storm, clutching the bag to her chest, she realized this wasn't over. Logan's empire had fallen, but its shadow was still alive, and she was now standing in its crosshairs. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. It fell in relentless sheets that blurred the world into gray, washing the city clean, but leaving Claire's heart heavy with dread. She hadn't slept since the warehouse. Ethan was gone, vanished after that gunshot, and every hour without word felt like a wound that refused to close. She had hidden herself and the twins in a small safe house that Ethan had once mentioned, an unlisted apartment above a closed bakery in Queens. The air smelled faintly of flour and dust, and the sound of trains passing in the distance gave her just enough noise to drown the fear. Her phone lay silent on the table beside her. Every time it buzzed, she jumped, terrified it would be the police, or worse, someone pretending to be. The only thing keeping her from breaking completely was the twins. Noah and Liam, only weeks old, slept beside her in a makeshift crib made from an old laundry basket and soft blankets. Watching them breathe gave her strength. "I'll keep you safe," she whispered, even when she wasn't sure she could. That afternoon, she opened the duffel bag Ethan had handed her before everything went to hell. Inside were the same folders and hard drives, but now she noticed something new. A small black flash drive taped to the inner lining, labeled simply "Raw Evidence, Confidential." Hands shaking, she plugged it into her laptop. A folder appeared. Inside were videos, encrypted files, and a document titled Novatech Partners. She clicked it and froze. There were names, dozens of them, politicians, investors, even a federal judge, all tied to offshore accounts under Logan's old company. And at the top of the list was a familiar one, Madison Cole. A chill crawled down her spine. Madison hadn't just betrayed her personally. She'd been part of Logan's criminal network all along. The mistress, the co-conspirator, the survivor. Claire's blood boiled. She wanted to scream, to tell the world, but a sound stopped her. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming up the back stairs. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She grabbed her phone and whispered, "Stay quiet," to the babies. The door creaked open. "Claire," a voice called softly. "It's me, Ethan." She ran to him before she could stop herself. He looked pale, exhausted, his left arm bandaged. There was dried blood on his shirt, but his eyes were still sharp. "You're alive," she breathed. "Barely," he said, shutting the door behind him. "They knew we were there. Someone tipped them off." "Who?" He hesitated, then pulled a folded paper from his jacket. It was a photo, grainy but clear enough to make her gasp. Madison, stepping out of a car, shaking hands with a man Claire didn't recognize. "Who is he?" she asked. "Leonid Voss," Ethan said. "Russian investor, one of the original Novatech partners. He's in New York now, cleaning up what's left of Logan's mess, and Madison's working for him." Claire stared at the photo, the truth slicing through her like glass. "So this isn't over?" "Not even close," Ethan said grimly. "Voss wants that drive you're holding, the one that links him to the network. If he gets it, all of this disappears, and so do we." She swallowed hard. "Then we make sure it never disappears." Ethan looked at her surprised. "Claire, this isn't your fight anymore. You have the twins." "It's exactly my fight," she interrupted. "He destroyed my life, Ethan. Madison helped him, and now they're coming after my children. You think I'll run again?" He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, then we fight smart." "How?" "We leak everything. Not to the press, to everyone. Thousands of emails, encrypted files, social platforms. We drown them in truth before they can silence us." Claire met his eyes, her fear burning into determination. "Then let's end this." Outside, thunder rolled over the city like a warning, and as Ethan began connecting the hard drives, Claire stood beside him. No longer the woman who'd been left behind, but the one who was about to bring down an empire. The city didn't sleep that night, and neither did Claire. The small apartment glowed with the pale light of computer screens, the hum of fans filling the silence. Ethan sat at the table, typing furiously, while Claire paced behind him, the duffel bag of evidence emptied across the floor. Papers, flash drives, photographs, all organized into neat, damning piles. "This is it," Ethan said quietly. "Once I hit send, there's no going back. We'll be targets, not just from Voss, but from everyone he owns." Claire stood beside him, her arms crossed. "We've been targets since the moment Logan walked into my life. I'm done hiding." He looked up at her. This woman who had survived betrayal, loss, and near death, and for a moment he saw something unbreakable in her eyes. "Then we burn it all down," he said. He pressed enter. The files began to upload. Thousands of documents, emails, and contracts copied across encrypted servers, shared through whistleblower networks, and sent to major media outlets. The progress bar filled slowly, pixel by pixel, the quiet countdown to war. By dawn, the world began to wake to chaos. Phones buzzed, reporters shouted, screens filled with headlines that spread faster than wildfire. Global corruption ring exposed, political and corporate leaders under investigation. And then, Novatech scandal, the widow who brought down the empire. Claire watched from the window as the city erupted. Her name trended online, her face splashed across every network. The same world that once pitied her now looked at her with awe. The woman who had exposed the billion-dollar shadow empire. Ethan turned on the TV. The anchor's voice trembled with disbelief as they listed the names. Logan Pierce, Madison Cole, Leonid Voss, and dozens of others. Claire exhaled, her hands trembling. "It's out." Ethan nodded. "It's out, and it can't be taken back." For a brief, fragile moment, she felt free. Then the phone rang. She picked it up, expecting a reporter, but froze when she heard the voice on the other end. Low, controlled, icy. "Claire Bennett," Madison said. Claire's grip tightened. "You should be in prison." A small laugh crackled through the line. "You really think this ends with a few emails and headlines? You have no idea who you just exposed." "Then enlighten me." Madison's tone turned sharp. "You think you're a hero, but you're a pawn. Voss doesn't forgive. You didn't just ruin him, you ruined people with power you can't imagine. You think you and your little lawyer can hide those babies forever?" The line went dead. Claire's blood turned to ice. She looked at Ethan. "They're coming for us." He didn't hesitate. "Pack what you can. We're moving now." Within minutes, the apartment was stripped bare. Ethan grabbed the drives. Claire bundled the twins, and together they slipped out the back stairs into the pre-dawn fog. They drove north, leaving the city behind. Claire held Noah and Liam close, her mind spinning with Madison's words. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Logan's smirk, Madison's betrayal, and Ethan's quiet determination. "Where will we go?" she asked. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. "Somewhere they won't expect. I know people, ones who hate Voss as much as we do." The car wound through back roads and empty highways. Outside, the sun rose slowly, painting the sky in shades of fire. Claire watched the horizon, exhaustion pressing down on her, but beneath it was something stronger. Defiance. She turned to Ethan. "You know what's coming, don't you?" He nodded. "A storm." Claire looked back at the twins, their tiny faces peaceful in the morning light. "Then we meet it head-on," she said quietly, "because I've already survived worse." And as their car disappeared into the rising dawn, the world Claire once knew burned behind them. But for the first time, she wasn't running from the fire. She was walking through it. The cabin sat deep in the Catskill Mountains, surrounded by silence, so thick it pressed against the windows. Claire hadn't slept since the drive. Every sound, the creak of old wood, the whisper of wind through the trees, felt like a warning. Ethan assured her they were safe here, but safety had become a word she no longer trusted. He'd managed to secure the cabin through an old contact, a former intelligence analyst who owed him a favor. There was no phone signal, no internet, no traceable link to the world they had just exposed. "We'll lay low for a while," Ethan said, his voice calm, though his eyes betrayed exhaustion. "The agencies are cleaning up the mess. Voss won't risk making a move until the spotlight fades." Claire nodded, though her instincts told her otherwise. "Madison called me," she said quietly. "She knew where we were before we moved. That means someone close to us leaked it." Ethan looked up sharply. "Did she say anything else?" "She said we've angered people we don't even know exist, that they'll come for the twins." His expression hardened. "Then we make sure they don't." Over the next few days, Ethan transformed the cabin into a fortress. Reinforced locks, hidden cameras, a backup generator. Claire watched him move with precision, always alert, always scanning the perimeter. It reminded her of how much he'd sacrificed to protect her. He wasn't just a lawyer anymore. He was a man haunted by what he'd lost and determined not to lose again. Meanwhile, Claire took care of the babies. The twins were her anchor, her reason to keep breathing. Noah was calm and observant, his dark eyes following her every movement, while Liam had her late husband's stubborn spirit, the irony not lost on her. Sometimes when she held them, she could almost forget the danger closing in. Almost. On the fourth night, the peace shattered. It began with the faint hum of an approaching car. Claire froze mid-step, her hand still on a baby bottle. Ethan was by the window in seconds, his expression tight. "No headlights," he muttered. "They're coming up the back road." Her heart thudded. "Who is it?" He didn't answer. He reached into the drawer and pulled out a handgun, checking the chamber. "Ethan, take the twins to the cellar. Don't make a sound." Claire grabbed the babies and fled to the trapdoor beneath the rug. Her hands trembled as she lowered herself into the narrow space, pulling the wooden panel closed above her. She could hear faint footsteps outside, boots crunching on gravel. Then came voices, male, cold, foreign accents. "Check the perimeter." A door creaked open. Heavy footsteps echoed overhead. Claire clutched her children to her chest, every muscle locked in terror. A crash shattered the silence, then another. The sound of a struggle, shouting, a gunshot. Her breath hitched. "Ethan." She pressed a hand over her mouth to keep from crying out. The twins stirred but didn't cry, as if they understood the gravity of the silence around them. Minutes crawled by like hours. Then, footsteps again, closer this time. Someone lifted the rug above her hiding place. The panel creaked open. A beam of light cut through the darkness, blinding her. But then a familiar voice whispered, "It's me." Ethan reached down, blood smeared across his sleeve, his eyes wild. "We have to go. Now." Claire climbed out, clutching the babies, her legs shaking. The cabin behind them was wrecked, windows shattered, furniture overturned. Two men lay unconscious near the door. "What happened?" she gasped. Ethan gritted his teeth. "They weren't Voss's men. They were federal." "Federal?" she whispered. "But why?" "Because someone made it look like we're the criminals now." The realization hit her like a slap. They had been framed, and as Ethan led her into the darkness of the forest, sirens echoing faintly in the distance, Claire understood that this wasn't just survival anymore. It was a war, and she had no idea who the enemy truly was. The forest swallowed them whole. Branches cracked beneath their feet as Claire and Ethan stumbled through the darkness. The twins pressed close to her chest. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts. The cold bit through her coat, but fear kept her warm. Somewhere behind them, engines roared and men shouted, a distant but relentless pursuit. "They're framing us," Claire whispered, clutching Noah and Liam tighter. "How is that even possible? We're the ones who exposed them." Ethan moved swiftly beside her, his flashlight beams slicing through the mist. "That's exactly why, Claire. Voss has money, connections. The moment the files went public, he blamed us, said we forged everything. The feds think we leaked false intel to manipulate the market." She stared at him, stunned. "And they believed that?" He gave a bitter laugh. "In their world, money talks louder than truth." They reached a clearing where an old shed stood half-collapsed under years of decay. Ethan pushed the door open, motioning her inside. The smell of damp wood and rust filled the air. "We'll rest here," he said quietly. "They won't search this deep until morning." Claire sank to the ground, her body trembling with exhaustion. The twins whimpered softly before drifting back to sleep. Ethan crouched by the doorway, peering out into the night. His shirt was torn, blood dried along his arm. "You're hurt," she said. "I've been worse." "Ethan?" She hesitated, then forced the words out. "Why are you doing this? You could have walked away. You didn't have to protect me." He turned to her, his face half-shadowed. "Because I couldn't protect my own family," he said simply. "I lost them because of Logan." Claire froze. "What do you mean?" Ethan's voice dropped, rough and low. "Logan didn't just steal my company. He stole my life. My wife, Rachel, she was pregnant when he framed me for fraud. She left, thinking I was a criminal. Died in a car crash before I could clear my name." The confession hit Claire like a wave. She covered her mouth, tears burning her eyes. "Ethan, I didn't know." He looked away. "That's why I helped you. You were living the same nightmare. But you did what I couldn't. You fought back." The air between them grew heavy, filled with grief and something deeper, something unspoken. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Ethan's radio crackled faintly in his pocket. Static, then a voice. "Target moving north. Orders are to capture alive." Ethan's eyes hardened. "They're closing in." Claire stood, determination slicing through her fear. Then we stopped running, he frowned. What are you talking about? She grabbed the duffel bag, the one containing the last encrypted drive. This is proof they can't bury. If we can get it to the media's encrypted network directly, every agency in the country will see the truth at once. No spin, no control. That's risky, he said. It's the only way. He hesitated, then nodded. There's a train depot 20 miles south. Freight line runs into the city. We can use it to upload the files from a terminal. They waited for dawn before moving again. Mist clung to the ground, the forest glowing silver in the first light. As they walked, Claire's mind churned. Flashes of Madison's voice, Logan's smirk, Voss's invisible hand behind everything. She was done being their pawn. Halfway through the trek, they heard it. The whir of a drone. Ethan swore under his breath, pulling her behind a rock. They found us, he hissed. Bullets tore through the trees, splintering bark. Claire shielded the babies, her heart hammering. Ethan fired back, hitting the drone, sending it spiraling into the dirt. Smoke curled into the air. They ran again, faster this time, until they reached the ridge overlooking the valley. Below, the abandoned train yard stretched out, glinting in the morning sun. We're close, Ethan said. One last push. Claire glanced at him, breathless. After this, it ends, right? He met her eyes. One way or another. And as they descended toward the rusted tracks, Claire knew she was stepping into the final chapter, where every secret would surface, every lie would burn, and the truth would finally cost its price. The abandoned train yard was a graveyard of rust and silence. Old freight cars stretched across the cracked earth like relics of another time, their metal sides tattooed with graffiti and bullet holes. The morning light bled through the fog, painting everything in shades of gray. Claire tightened the strap of the baby carrier across her chest, feeling Noah's faint heartbeat against her own. Liam slept on her back in a soft sling. Every step she took was heavy, but her resolve was harder than the steel tracks beneath her. Ethan led the way, his gun drawn, eyes scanning the horizon. The main terminal should still have power, he said quietly. Old system, but enough to connect. Once we're in, we'll upload everything. Claire nodded, gripping the duffel bag that had become their lifeline. How long will it take? 2 minutes, he said. Then, after a beat, if we're lucky. They slipped into the terminal, a hollow building filled with broken glass and echoes. Sunlight filtered through shattered windows, illuminating dust in the air like falling stars. Ethan found a working console near the back, its screen flickering weakly to life. This is it, he said. Once I start the transfer, there's no stopping it. Then do it, Claire said, setting the bag on the table. Her voice didn't waver, but inside, her heart was pounding. Ethan inserted the final drive. Lines of code began racing across the screen. It's uploading, he murmured. Encrypted stream. No one can intercept it. For a brief moment, there was only the sound of the fan whirring, the faint hum of electricity. Claire dared to breathe, but then the terminal lights flickered. What's happening? She asked. Ethan's face went pale. They're here. A black SUV roared into the yard outside, tires screeching on gravel. Men in tactical gear poured out, rifles raised. Claire ducked instinctively as bullets shattered the windows. Keep it running, Ethan shouted, returning fire. It's almost done. Glass exploded above them. Claire covered the twins with her body, her pulse thundering in her ears. Ethan, hurry! 70%, he yelled. He fired again, taking down one of the gunmen. The others spread out, circling the building. The air smelled of smoke and gunpowder. 85! A bullet ripped through Ethan's shoulder, spinning him backward. He fell hard, his hand pressed against the wound. Blood bloomed across his shirt. Ethan, Claire cried. I'm fine, he gritted out. Stay down. She crawled to him, reaching for the keyboard. Tell me what to do. He pointed to the screen, his voice strained. When it hits 100, pull the cable. That'll trigger the broadcast. 95%. 96. 97. A grenade clattered through the doorway. Ethan lunged forward, grabbing it and hurling it back before it exploded outside. The blast shook the walls. 98. 99. The bar turned green. Upload complete. Now, he shouted. Claire yanked the cable. The screen flashed. Data distributed. Global feed active. It was done. Ethan sagged against the wall, his face pale but smiling faintly. You did it. She grabbed his arm. We have to go. But before they could move, a figure stepped through the smoke. Madison Cole. Her blonde hair was tied back, her expensive coat marred with soot. In her hand was a gun. "Well," she said coldly, "you really did it this time, Claire." Claire's blood ran cold. "You're too late." Madison smirked. "Maybe, but I only need one thing left, you." She raised the gun, aiming straight at Claire's chest. Before Claire could react, Ethan threw himself in front of her. The gun fired. The sound was deafening. Ethan staggered, blood blossoming beneath his ribs. He fell into her arms, gasping. Madison's face twisted, rage, shock, then fear, as the sound of sirens grew in the distance. Federal vehicles stormed the yard, blue lights flashing through the smoke. She turned to run, but it was too late. Agents swarmed her, dragging her down. Claire cradled Ethan, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Hold on, please." He smiled weakly. "You're free now." "No," she whispered. "Not without you." His hand brushed her cheek. "Raise them well, Claire. Make sure they know their father wasn't the only man who ever loved you." And with that, his hand fell still. As the sirens wailed and the dawn broke through the ruins, Claire looked down at the man who had saved her, realizing that the truth had finally cost its last and greatest price: love. The next morning dawned quiet. Too quiet for a city that had just witnessed the fall of giants. Claire sat on the hospital steps, wrapped in a gray blanket, the twins asleep in their carrier. Her face was pale, eyes hollow from crying. The world around her buzzed with news cameras, sirens, and flashing lights, but she didn't see or hear any of it. Ethan was gone. The man who had dragged her out of the wreckage, who had stood between her and every gun aimed her way, now lay in a white room 2 floors up, motionless under a sheet. She had signed the papers that morning. It felt like signing away the last piece of her heart. The FBI had cleared her name. The upload had exposed everything: Voss, Madison, the politicians, the corporate partners. The files had gone global, mirrored across servers in dozens of countries. There was no undoing it now. The world finally saw the truth. But truth had a cost. An agent approached, a tall man in a black coat, his tone gentle but professional. "Miss Bennett, we're arranging protective custody. Voss's network still has assets overseas. Until things settle, we recommend you stay under federal supervision." Claire shook her head slowly. "No, I'm done hiding." He hesitated. "You've become a target again." "I've been one for years," she said softly. "I'm just not afraid of it anymore." He studied her for a moment, then nodded respectfully and walked away. Claire looked down at her sons, their faces serene and unknowing. "You'll never remember any of this," she whispered, stroking Noah's cheek, "but you'll know what it cost." Inside the hospital, reporters gathered outside the intensive care ward. News of Ethan Rose's sacrifice had already spread. The lawyer who died protecting the truth. People were calling him a hero, though Claire doubted he'd ever wanted that title. He would have hated the attention. When she was finally allowed back inside, she walked down the hallway to the viewing room. Through the glass, she could see the flag folded neatly over the end of his bed. The sight broke something deep inside her. Not in the loud, shattering way grief usually came, but in a quiet, aching silence. She whispered, "You promised me we'd win, and we did, but you didn't promise you'd stay." That night, she returned to the safe house one last time. The duffel bag still sat by the door, half burned, half empty. She opened it and found Ethan's small notebook, the one he always carried, filled with neat handwriting. Inside, a single line was written across the final page. "Truth isn't peace, Claire, but sometimes peace is born from those brave enough to tell it." Tears blurred her vision. She closed the notebook and pressed it to her chest. Weeks passed. Investigations deepened. Arrests were made around the world. Madison's face appeared on every network, her plea deal dissected by every anchor. Voss had vanished, but his empire crumbled without him. Claire refused every interview request. She focused on her children instead, moving into a quiet home by the ocean. Each morning she'd walk the beach with the twins bundled in her arms, the salt air reminding her that she was still alive, still free. Sometimes, she'd catch herself turning when she thought she heard Ethan's voice on the wind. Other times she'd dream of him sitting beside her, that same calm strength in his eyes, whispering, "You made it." One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she stood on the sand watching the waves roll in. She took a deep breath, the first one in what felt like years. "Ethan," she said softly, looking toward the endless horizon, "you were right. Peace doesn't come easy, but I found it anyway. Behind her, Noah stirred in his stroller, his tiny hand reaching up toward the orange sky. And as the tide washed away the last footprints of her past, Claire realized that for the first time, her story wasn't about pain or betrayal. It was about survival, redemption, and the love that lived on long after goodbye. 3 years later, the world knew Claire Bennett not as the woman who'd been betrayed, but as the woman who had changed everything. The scandal that once destroyed her life had become a global case study in courage and truth. Every year, on the anniversary of the Novatech leak, newspapers reprinted the story of the widow who fought the empire. But for Claire, fame had never been the goal. Her real victory was quieter, gentler. 2 little boys with her eyes and Ethan's resilience, growing up in a world finally free of their father's shadow. Her home sat on a cliff overlooking the Maine coast, surrounded by wildflowers and ocean air. The house was modest but warm, designed by her own hands, a place built from healing instead of fear. The twins, Noah and Liam, were nearly 4 now, full of endless energy and laughter. They didn't remember the chaos that had brought them here, and she intended to keep it that way. That morning, sunlight streamed through the wide windows as Claire prepared breakfast. The boys raced down the hallway, their tiny feet pounding the wood floors. "Mommy, look!" Liam shouted, holding up a crayon drawing. It was a stick figure of a woman with long brown hair, 2 smaller figures beside her, and a taller man with a red heart drawn on his chest. Claire smiled softly. "Who's that, sweetheart?" "That's you and us," Liam said proudly. "And that's Uncle Ethan. He helps us when we're scared." Her breath caught. The twins had never met Ethan, not really. But sometimes, when they were quiet, she caught them talking to the man in the light, describing him perfectly. She didn't question it. Some bonds, she believed, didn't end with death. After breakfast, she drove into town for the grand opening of the Roe Foundation for Single Mothers, a project she'd spent the last 2 years building, named in Ethan's honor. The center stood at the edge of the harbor, its glass walls reflecting the sea. Inside, dozens of women gathered, each one carrying their own story of loss, strength, and rebirth. A journalist from the New York Times approached her near the podium. "Miss Bennett," he said gently, "you've become an icon for women everywhere. How do you feel standing here today?" Claire looked around the room, at the smiling mothers, the children laughing in the corner, the warmth that pulsed through the air. "I don't feel like an icon," she said. "I feel grateful. Because pain didn't win. It tried, but it didn't." He smiled. "And what would you say to those who are still trapped, afraid to fight back?" Claire paused, her voice soft but certain. "I'd tell them the truth doesn't destroy you, it saves you. It burns, it breaks, but what's left afterward, that's who you really are. That's where your power lives." When the ceremony ended, applause echoed through the hall. Claire stepped outside to the terrace overlooking the ocean. The sky had turned golden, waves shimmering like glass. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small object, Ethan's old notebook. The last page was still folded. She opened it and read his handwriting one last time. "Some truths are worth dying for, if they let others live free." Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of grief. They were of peace, the kind she'd thought she'd never feel again. She whispered, "We did it, Ethan. They're safe." The gentle wind swept across the terrace, lifting her hair and rustling the pages of the notebook. And for a moment she swore she heard his voice again, carried on the sea breeze, calm, steady, proud. "You kept your promise." Claire smiled, closing her eyes as the sun dipped below the horizon. Behind her, Noah and Liam's laughter rang out, pure and unburdened. And as the waves rolled against the shore, Claire Bennett finally understood that her story was never about revenge or survival. It was about rebirth, love that defied death, and a woman who turned her scars into light for everyone who came after her. So that's how our story ends. You're still here, right? If you've stayed with me until now, maybe something in Claire's journey touched a part of your heart too. The part that knows pain, loss, and the long road to healing. Her story isn't just about revenge or survival. It's about becoming whole again after being shattered. You see, the Stoic philosophers used to say, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Claire learned that truth the hard way. That peace doesn't come from what happens to us, but from how we choose to rise afterward. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the obstacle is the way. And maybe that's the message for all of us. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the failure, they don't define us, they refine us. So if life has broken you a little, remember, you're not broken beyond repair. You're being shaped into someone stronger, wiser, freer. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength, give it a like, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel. Because here, we tell stories that heal, one heart at a time.